Mr. Eben.
Thank you for having me again, sir.
Yes, I'm glad to have you back. And one of the reasons why why you're coming back so soon is because from your last show we had a lot of questions where people told us that one of the biggest problems in the territory is the colonial forces seizing these youths, getting their phones, getting information there, and using that information to reach other targets. And I remember from the other show you were talking about mesh networks. Is that something that can help, or how do you solve a problem like that?
Yeah, so again, thanks for having me. So on the problem of the ability of security officials to access your network through your phone, there are a couple of tools to deal with that. I think the most important one is that the way the Android phone is made, especially Android phone, just locking your phone. It's boring, to constantly put a password to open your phone. So a lot of people just let it be. You just swipe, it opens. But in reality, with Android is that when you lock your phone with a password, it does encrypt the hard disk.
Okay.
So if somebody sees your phone, the person would get a lot of extra effort to be able to crack into the phone without you giving them the password, technologically wise, And of course, some people can have beefed that up with screen locking applications, The best place to, like an activist, the best place to keep an eye for technology so that you are constantly on top of the game is called the FSF.org website. That's the Free Software Foundation website. They have a unit there, a link there once you go to the front of the website, which is basically surveillance self-defense, which kind of lists a couple of these applications that you can literally download anyone to encrypt your machine, so that, for example, when you get arrested by the police, in the case of our people in protest, and they take the phones, the phones are useless to them in terms of trying to mine data out of the phone to find out who are your contacts and all of that stuff like that. So I hope I did answer that question for you.
Yeah, so that they can beat up these kids and ask them to
put the password. That's correct.
Yeah.
But the problem of the matter is it's kind of in terms of there's no way in a mesh network that you can push your data away. You can. There are some systems where you just log into the system and use it. For example, most people use the client mail on the Android phone. Right. If I were living in the territory now, I would not use that. Right.
You wouldn't use the
client
network.
The client mail. There's an email client on your phone.
Okay.
Now it's a easy thing. It makes it easy. You have all your emails. You can go forth and back and all of that through the phone. But the point is that even if the phone is off, then if somebody beats you up and you open the phone, they can immediately see your entire email collection.
Okay.
The flip side of that is that if you're on a browser, right, it's a little slow, sometimes. But if I'm out of the browser, there's nothing you can do to access my emails. Except you have to again beat me up to get me to log into the browser, then log into my emails.
Okay.
So
now, is there any system where it can encrypt your phone, that the data in your phone, so that somebody can read it?
So that somebody cannot read it.
Yeah.
Again, like you were explaining before, they would beat you to get a passphrase, right?
Yeah. But there's nothing that would encrypt. That would
to decrypt. So to decrypt. So what normally would happen is that if you arrest a lot of people, it would be hard to grab one, beat them up, and say which one is your phone, and then beat them up again to say give me password. So what they would tend to do is that when they take the phone, they will just plug it into computers that have data mining. They will just suck all data out of the phone.
Okay.
And that's where I say, please just put the password on your phone.
Okay.
Only that password in your phone is a big step.
Yeah.
So if you grab the phone and go plug it in there, the way Android is made, it has an encryptment automatically once you have a password. So as long as the password is not passed, that computer that is plugged into the phone intended to read the data of the phone would not be able to read the data of the phone easily.
Right. You also told me that if they're going on a protest march, they shouldn't take their phones with them.
Well, I don't think Cameroon is that good. I don't think they're there yet, but definitely with the fact that our struggle is so threatening to the French, there's something called a scanner. It's a little machine. You basically bring it. The police will put it in their car and bring it to a protest. And when all phones that are on around that place would talk to the scanner, because your cell phone talks to antennas.
Okay.
Your cell phone is constantly calling out for antennas. Right?
Okay.
And that's why the cell phone companies are constantly building different antennas everywhere. So there's a place where you have network, place where you don't have network. That happens all the time when there are not enough antennas around.
Okay.
So this scanner basically pretends that it's an antenna. So your phone will call out, I want to call, MTN antenna, and the police scanner will say, yeah, I'm over here, how are you doing? And your phone will say yes, and he will say to your phone, could you please give me all your contacts? And your phone will give the contacts.
And that's without,
they're able to
you don't know that.
You don't know that.
It doesn't vibrate, it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything. The phone is on, it's in your pocket, and the scanner is on, because that's the way your phone communicates.
If they shut it off, if they knock off the power, would it communicate?
The assumption is that if you put off the phone, it will not be accessible. But during Ed Snowden's revelations of some of the technologies that the U.S. Services are using, which happen to be accessible to the French, I think, and which automatically, when they're accessible to the French, then you can almost...
They give their colonial...
they use them in their colonies.
Yeah.
You can almost expect them to use that. The problem is that some of that technology is very expensive.
Okay.
So, for example, like during the time when we were discussing in the territory about mobile radio at the time, when TV was not yet available, we were discussing about radio, which I still think at the time, the fact is to catch a radio station, you need to triangulate it, right? You need to put a couple of antennas, and Cameroon just didn't have that kind of facility. So if people were carrying mobile radio stations around, they would have been very, very successful with that. And because it's just expensive, I think you have to understand the whole agenda of the colonizers is to exploit, it's not to invest too much. So when the investment becomes too much, then they just resort to mass punishment as a way out of it. So instead of them trying to investigate who are the people who are posting videos about the videos they didn't like, they just cut internet for everybody, right? Mass punishment.
They've always used mass punishment, and that's a tactic that the Nazis use very, very, very much. They come and round up a neighborhood and then select the Jews or select whoever they want out of that neighborhood. It's amazing that they still practice that in the 21st century.
That is correct, and documentation of that is very, very important in terms of changing public opinion internationally against the regime, because people naturally have a quick understanding of there's no logic for you can't pretend that a whole population is criminal, which is always, law enforcement is always the pretense that the regime or their colonizer will always give, that we're trying to enforce the law,
No, but criminals cannot be enforcing the law.
Thank you. You're very right.
You know what I'm saying?
You're absolutely
right. And so if anybody wants to defer judgment or to decide who to listen to, it will not be French agents who are in the territory pretending to be the government and the French micromanage them to exploit the people. This question you may not be able to answer, but I'm going to pose it, okay?
Sure.
And I think just posing it is important enough.
Thank you.
I remember that the West the West did support apartheid in South Africa for a very long time.
That's correct.
And it seems to me that the West is supporting French continuous colonization of Africa and exploitation of Africa.
Yes, so I think, what was your question?
That the West is the West tend to support this criminality when it's being perpetuated by a Western government.
That is true.
And when I say Western government, I really do not want to equate the French with anybody else, because, like I said, they are the only colonial masters in Africa right now.
I totally agree. So there is a difference between the government and the people they're governing, right? So the difference is that governments are power structures. They have all this various power play going on, but the way a people like us, the way we get the Western governments to support our case is not by assuming that they have a certain moral compass. It's by reaching out to the people in those countries, right? So that's a good example was apartheid, right? The apartheid regime, a lot of the other economic powers, Caterpillar had business in apartheid South Africa, Coca-Cola had business in apartheid South Africa. There are a lot of people in South Africa who could afford to buy Coca-Cola and Caterpillar, and these companies wanted the money, and they really do not care about the consequences of what is happening down there. And people in South Africa run through the streets. They were shot every day. Sharpeville massacre. We know all the stories. The Soweto massacre. Those things happened. The press wrote an article about it one day, and the next day,
it's a different story.
A different story.
They moved to a different story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then people thought, okay, it's time to reach out to the people in the Western countries. And activists in the United States started the boycott and how do you call it, the embargo, asking that the Western countries put an embargo against the apartheid's economic embargo. And of course, Coca-Cola and Caterpillar and Ford, they had lobbyists in Washington, D.C. and in some of these Western countries. Their lobbyists said to the congressman, you cannot do this. We need this money to pay for your elections. But the thing is, the outreach to the ordinary people continued. And when the time came that the various people in Minnesota here reached out to the congressman and said, do you support the embargo, economic embargo on apartheid, and do you support the suspending of all relationship with apartheid? The congressman had to choose whether he wanted to support Caterpillar or he wanted to support his local people, or they will vote him out.
Yes.
And so that kind of negotiation only comes out of reaching out to the people.
Yes.
And that is where students, especially who are always normally the moral vehicle for most societies, because this group is young, they are still trying to look at the world with a fair and just eye. And so we end up with a situation where even the Congress, at the time when people have forced their Congress people to vote for an embargo on South Africa, Reagan was the president at the time.
Yes.
Reagan vetoed it.
Yes.
But the Congress people, there were enough Congress votes to overturn it.
To override it.
So the question in our case is, well, we don't have Caterpillar, is not exactly doing big business in Cameroon. Coca-Cola is doing some business, but I'm sure people might say, well, I think their business will survive without business in Cameroon. So what do you do? The question has always been, you go for the economy, right?
Yes, yes.
The reason why people were trying to stop Caterpillar and Coca-Cola from doing business with South Africa was for the South African economy to take the blunt of it. Once it took the blunt of it, the army couldn't support it anymore. The ordinary South Africans couldn't support it anymore. If Cameroonian people in Cameroon, like the Republic of Cameroon, if they too cannot get their paychecks, if the armies too cannot be paid over there, it's going to be a different story. Suddenly their morals are going to change as a society. And so our case then becomes, since there's no big business situation that we can ask for sanctions and boycott, then how is the economy of Cameroon functioning? It's not based on some solid economic concept. It's functioning based on foreign aid. So our equivalence of the boycott and sanction and sanction that was used in South Africa, our equivalent should be to cut the economy, to cut access to that economy, which is money. So that's how I.
So when you, in terms of money, so what institutions are you suggesting that we target?
The primary vehicle, the biggest contributor of foreign, Cameroon government relies on aid. The biggest contributor of foreign aid in the world is the United States government.
Okay.
The United States have a constitutional prerogative that says it is not allowed legally for the United States to give money to a country that violates the rights of people, ordinary people. Now, the only reason why Cameroon is able to keep getting away with that is lobbying. That makes, there's no pressure for anybody to, once you tell your congressman, you write to your congressman, hey, this is what's happening in Cameroon. According to US law, this is the Cameroon government should not receive any money from the US. Once we organize those of us here and do it in an organized manner, then what the next step will be, Congress will say, okay, State Department, could you give us a report how the Cameroon government gets to get money from us? And of course, the usual thing, the State Department will close the tap and be like, we didn't get time to look at that, we just noticed it and we've shut the tap, and they will not get any money from us. It has happened, whether it's Cambodia, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it is the apartheid South African government, whether it is the Mobutu government in Congo. We have, those of us who are out of the country, have an obligation to use these tools that have been tested before to try to stop our young people from getting to this faith. I mean, the kids that are dead, they could very equally be us. There's no difference between any of those kids and me or any person who's watching the program right now. They just protested for basic rights.
Yes.
You know,
and they're not violent. It's not like they're hurting anybody.
Thank you.
They're just using their voices to speak up.
Yes,
but you know, thieves don't want noise because it attracts attention.
Yes,
and that's why they've been killed.
That's correct.
And so I think basically what you're saying is that Ambazonians that are in the diaspora
Yes.
either as residents or citizens
or asylees
or
or
asylees
whatever.
or whatever.
Especially those of us who are those people who are citizens, right?
Yes, they should communicate to their congressmen, to their senators,
and say, this is what is happening. I need you like my senator. I reject the notion that my taxes have been exploited by this regime, right?
Yes.
And that is where you don't just do it yourself, you also recruit other Americans.
Yes, you have to have other people
Other
to
Americans.
work with
So
you.
if you're a teacher, like some of us are doing, you have to ask your own teachers, do you want your taxes that you pay to be paying for a regime that is killing teachers in Ambazonia? I think the answer is no.
Yes.
Then you ask other students, do you want the taxes of your father, your mother, the hard-earned taxes that they pay to be given to a regime that is killing mothers and brothers and sisters of other people in Ambazonia? The answer is a definite no.
So, from what you're saying, it doesn't seem to me that the UN is even part of the solution, because there's no constituents to target that can put pressure on the UN.
That is absolutely correct. That is why the UN passed an embargo against apartheid South Africa, and nothing changed. The United States put an embargo against South Africa, declared negotiated.
Yes. Yes.
The UN.
So our people should not be thinking that the solution is with the UN.
No, it's not. The UN is. So we have a problem, and our problem, we're trying to explain this problem to the world. And the way we justify this problem, like every country justifies history, is to look for legal documents. So sometimes we can reference UN documents and all that.
Yes.
We are referencing those documents to convince people.
Mm-hmm.
What we're targeting is not the UN, it's people, to convince people that we have a legitimacy to not be treated this way, beyond the human character. And so the UN is very, very below in terms of impact. The UN, like an institution, has never. The fundamental question, like a student of anything, is that you look at where have they done it before.
Yes.
They have never done it before.
They can come into to legalize it.
When the United States government has said we've cut the economy,
yes,
and the Cameroon government has hit the wall,
yes,
that is when the United States government will say, okay, let's look at the UN for the way to enforce these things, or the way to apply what the folks in the country that is part, Morocco has seized part of their land.
Western Sahara.
Western Sahara. They are members of AU. The UN has passed all kinds of resolutions against them. They are still occupied by Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
And Morocco does not want people here in the United States knowing about that. And the activists, Western Sahara activists that are here, they are reaching out to their Congress people. The same thing. The UN put an embargo against, in the case when apartheid South Africa occupied Namibia. Nothing changed. It took people in different countries to say to their government, especially the US government, they have to be an embargo against the South African government for them to back off. So why is that?
Yes,
it's because
I want to go back to that photograph that we looked.
Yes.
And say that any of our citizens who are abroad, they should take a look at that picture and decide what they want to do with it, because that is something that I hesitate to say if, because I think it is pretty clear that it is pretty clear that that's in Ambazonia.
Yes.
And so most of the people that we're asking to have them returned from jail, they're probably in no jail.
Yeah. And it is so it paints a very vivid picture of the regime we're talking about, right?
Yes.
And the fact the French have done this all the time.
Yes.
They did it in Algeria, they did it in Rwanda, they did it in Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, when this guy came back, Sassou Nguesso came back with his gang called the Cobras, and they killed thousands of innocent people who had, in the previous protest that overthrew Sassou Nguesso out of power, participated simply communities. In Togo, they did the same thing. Like I was saying, I remember helicopters carrying bodies of activists in Togo, dumping them in the sea, and those bodies being pushed back out of sea. And then those troops going and threatening those villages that, when the human rights investigators come here, you don't attest to having seen bodies. So this, our case where we have this situation, we need to. There are two ways I look at it. Mm-hmm. It's also emblematic of the way where our struggle is. Somebody took those pictures. Mm-hmm. Kudos to that person who took the risk to take those pictures. Now, they have done their job.
We have the obligation.
We have the obligations to these kids who died for no other reason but that me and you, when we have a country we can go back to, that our people can sleep and fulfill their full human potential and not have to go to courts where they are sent in jail or exploited without any rights. We've gone through this for so long to the point where people have tried to fight back now. Those of us who are not down there to take the blunt of what these kids took, we have an obligation to take the next step in this struggle to bring it to the doorsteps of people who can do something about it.
Who can do something.
Yes.
But I want to bring you another thing. These kids who are thrown in the ocean, we do see.
Yes.
But the other killings in the territory that are going on that we do not see. And I want to bring the story of Sonara, because that's where they're killing other people and people do not know that. And the way they do it, they do not know. And you have a story, you do understand how that works.
Yes, so that's it's very frightful because it shifts the perspective, right? It's one thing that somebody's protesting against you and you, as crazy as you are, like a regime, you're trying to clamp down on the protest. It's another thing when, like we were talking last time, you take soldiers that have HIV and you send them to a community.
Yes.
That's a different level.
Yes, they're trying to clear out the population.
That's a different level.
Yes.
And that's the same kind of thing with Sonara, right? We remember a couple of years ago, information leaked that cancer-causing remains, residue of petroleum exploitation were being dumped into the sea in Victoria without being treated. Right? Normally, in every mining situation, you treat the waste, the cancer-causing waste, before you dump it in the water. Why? So that the communities that live along
the ocean,
on the shore where you are doing this exploitation, do not become victims of these cancer-causing agents.
Right, and so that it shouldn't affect aquatic life from which the people feed themselves. And
information leaked last time. There was this captain, I've forgotten his name. I think he was Captain Jiang, who got into huge trouble and it ended up costing him his life because he was totally outraged when he saw that and he leaked the information about the fact that the Republic of Cameroon, they just took this waste, put it in gallons, closed it, and dumped it in the sea without treatment. Now, a couple of years...
Does it sink?
It doesn't. What the waves beat it up and down. Some of it gets opened. The product gets exposed to the water, and of course these are chemicals, right? This is not just something that gets overwhelmed by. And so when you look today, it's not an accident that people along the Bimbia area, that whole coast, cancer proliferation has gotten out of hand. It's not an accident. All these things are connected. That's what we were talking about, this kind of slow dissemination of a community without people knowing about it, right? Because a lot of the poor people, they don't know about it, right? People who are living in Victoria, who live from eat this fish that gets caught and brought back, they don't know that, right? Until when this guy exposed that. The question is, was that changed? If it was changed, why would somebody think it necessary? That cost him his life at the time. So there's all of these things. These are the kind of things that push us in the position where we have to recognize that we don't have an option, right? You know, sometimes I hear people say things like, well, we can figure out some way to live with them.
No.
The regime has defined us. You need to define the people in a particular way to do that kind of stuff to them.
Yes.
To slowly poison them, to try to infect them with disease. There need to be a certain kind of definition of a people in your strategy policy to do that to them.
Yes.
And so when a people have been defined in that way, the only way to stop it, it's not going to be...
It's to cut the connection. It's to cut the connection. No, it's to build a wall. I don't want to repeat Trump, but it's really to build a wall.
Yes, it's to set the political context where you have total autonomy to determine your own destiny.
Yes.
And the reason I'm saying that is because this afternoon we're hearing this new little shimmers of Cameroon thinking they are too smart to propose some so-called federation situation,
Yes,
as if
yes.
by proposing federation that kind of solves any problem.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't stop a government in a situation of the so-called federation equation, even if they were supposed. Let's imagine in the best case scenario that Cameroon became the most serious people in following federal rules. That would not stop them from throwing chemicals in our water.
No.
And there's no way for them to pretend that, it was just a one-time thing. It wasn't a one-time thing. It wouldn't stop them from sending troops into our territory that are infected with HIV to poison our community. When
It will not stop them from shooting kids and throwing the water, hoping that nobody will see it.
Yes. When a government has become the purpose of a government to manage when it has crossed the line and it becomes a liability to a community, the people have a human given right to kick that government out without any explanation or historical context or justification.
Yes.
We have reached that threshold.
I want to say something about the federation.
Yes.
In 1960, we had two options: to either be totally independent or federate.
Yes.
We chose federation.
Yes.
It is that federation path that we have been on for 56 years.
And that has brought us to this place where we are.
It has brought us where we are.
Dead kids and
yes, it's brought us to where our resources are being
pillaged,
exploited, and nothing comes back.
Pillaged completely. Yep.
Yes, it's come where the industries that are in where they are forced to establish in a territory like Sonara.
Yeah.
The proceeds go somewhere else. Even the local taxes that manage even the environment where that industry is, they pay it to their own territory in Douala. It's come to a situation where, if you notice one thing, and I was listening to somebody discuss this, and it occurred to me that they are very, very correct. They said these people were not trying to colonize us. They were not trying to assimilate us. They were trying to eliminate us.
That's the HIV explanation. That is the senseless poisoning, right?
Yes,
because
and they eliminate.
It comes out of Sonara. Go ahead.
Absolutely, they eliminate not just by doing what you're saying. They eliminate by replacing us in our land with their own agents, and that's why you see they're replacing the teachers. They're replacing the law, the judges. They have already in Bamenda. I understand that most of the businesses are owned by francophones, and there's a way how they do this. It's not through competition.
It's not by accident.
They limit credit to our own citizens and give them credit to establish the businesses.
Yes.
And so you end up. In fact, there's a story that is said that that the gas stations in Bamenda are all owned by francophones, Bamilekes mostly, and that what happens is that if the taxi drivers actually, if one of our own people owns a gas station and say our people start patronizing it, maybe a little too much to their liking, they stop selling wholesale to that individual. You understand? So if you call Bamenda now,
multiple ways to shut us down.
No, there are multiple ways. If you look, if you start replacing, I've said this several times on one of my other shows, and I will be saying it all the time, that if you are not giving us jobs, what are you doing? You're allowing other people to have the jobs, take the money, start replacing our children in our
in their own homes, being able to...
No, not in homes, in schools.
Okay.
I mean, if I were still back home now, my parents couldn't afford to send me to CPC Valley like they did, because you have francophones who come now and they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm sure the bribes are even bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? So they and for each child who comes from La Republique du Cameroon comes and takes a spot. The children who used to come from Guy, who used to come from Go, from poor families, from womb, they have no chance. And those are some of the people who brought their families, just that one child. They brought their family from extreme yes to
normal
to
basic,
and give them a life.
Yeah.
They educate their brothers, and that's how our society grows.
Yeah.
So this elimination is not just in the killings we're talking about. It's also in what else they're doing. You call Bamenda now, the general phone system is answered in French. You go to the bank, they speak to you in French. It's crazy. It is crazy. But we were actually a state of our own. And when we came together, we were supposed to come together through a federation. And like a lot of lawyers have said, there is no act of union. So the federation you were talking about, we have been on that path, and it's led us down where we are being extinguished from our land. Exterminated. And so the only other option for our survival is total and complete independence.
Which is the option every people under the sun have taken for their own people. This is a right not negotiable, basically, because it is about the autonomy of the person, of a community, to thrive, right?
Yes.
And they have just look at our community. Look at. It's not been that normal that a community goes so backward, totally reverse development. It's just not normal. You don't see it anywhere. After the end of colonialism, every country, the number of educated people, the number of roads, the number of industry jumps the other way.
Yes.
Our case has gone
all
the
our
other way
industries have
backwards.
been, all our industries have been stripped.
Has gotten, one way, it's not the best, but it's definitely gotten the positive direction, in their own territory. So it cannot be, that's why the reason I mentioned that was because I know that under the pressure that people are going through right now, the government is throwing everything they can, the kitchen sink, right? Oh, federation, oh, minister that, oh, DO that.
Yeah, 40 duos, blah, blah, blah. The thing is that, and the people of Southern Cameroon and Ambazonia should know that all of this is taking place because of their actions. Their actions.
And that is why every person whose name gets listed in that list of duos, they need to put their own increment, like we said yesterday in the last video. And every time any document passes their table, they should take a picture of it and send it out through the same channels that our people have been able to share. Hey, look at this document. This is what they're planning to do next. The same way, I think I saw someone on, I think it was YouTube, saying, hey, this is what they're planning to do next. Hey, listen, this story that they said they gave this chief bribe and he didn't take it. They made it up. It's fake. This is really the ex-chief that took it. They're trying to put pressure on this chief to take it by exposing them to the public like haven't taken bribe. And since the chief doesn't have any way to fight back, and then some insider there was able to say, no, you guys got it wrong. I was there, X took bribe, D, Y said it's not in his position to be able to take it. Those things, those tactical, psychological war things, they are going to expand on those.
Okay.
So we need to be able, every time there's something on our face, the question we need to ask is this going to push our interest or not? If the answer is no, then it is no.
Yeah, it is no.
It is no. So
it is no.
Federation, is it going to push our interest or not?
No.
The answer is no.
Yeah, we've been trying federation. We've been trying federation for 56 years.
All these years.
It took us to total elimination. Yeah. There's another thing I want to talk to you about, and I did talk about it a little bit in reaction to one of my guests, and it is symbolism.
Thank you.
In the struggle.
Yes.
And in the symbolism which I was addressing is this thing about feeding us Makossa, and some of us think that Makossa is our music. And I was trying to clarify to the person that before La Republique came over, we were listening to High Life. We wanted to talk about our own music, and our musicians were playing High Life. We were very Western and oriented, okay. And when they came, they just through slowly and quietly they eliminated our route through Manfe into the territory. And that's why Manfe, that used to be a booming key town of a lot of products and ideas coming into our territory, became a ghost town, if you want to use ghost town in that sense,
And that's
so help us with symbolism in the struggle.
Yes, so symbolism is very, very central in the struggle. When because the like a species, our brains, there's so much information coming in, our brain reduces that information to a summary. And symbols are summaries of sorts, right? So if you take a lot of us, because they have tried to indoctrinate us all these years, when we see green, red, yellow, our brain goes Cameroon. Green, that's not biology.
And that flag was created by the French.
Thank you.
The Ambazonian flag.
Yes.
Ambazonians sat down and created that flag.
That is correct. And so that's the issue of symbolism. That's just a little example of how important symbols are. you have to recognize, for example, in the United States, when during their struggle for independence, after they got independence, Americans have been celebrating the birthday of the king on the 4th of July.
King George.
King George. His 4th of July was his birthday.
Okay.
This is a big party, and they decided, the activists for American independence decided, you know what, if we take a party from the people, it's going to be very, very heartbreaking. We just change the name of the party. Instead of King George's birthday, it's Independence Day. And the current generation talks about that with a big heart and their hand on top, reminding their own struggle. So symbols are very, very, in this country, when the independent movement in this country, they invented what they call American football.
Okay.
Because they knew soccer, everybody was in this sport, but it was very, very tight to the British.
Soccer was a British invention.
Very tight to the British, not just the British invention, but also to the British identity. And they were like, okay, we have to create our own equation, something else, just something that doesn't. And they invested in basketball, just anything except anything that reminds our people of anything good about their oppressor. And
that's why soccer is so popular around the world, but
not here.
Okay.
Right? And that's why basketball and other sports got such a boost. So we cannot downplay symbols. One of the ways you recognize how powerful symbols are, the generation before our own generation, me and you, it's still hard for them to bring themselves to not talk about West Cameroon.
Yes. Yes.
They're trying to talk about our independence, and they're like, we want West Cameroon, and English Cameroon.
They forget that West Cameroon is a creation of that federation that we're still living under.
Yeah, why is that? They have been programmed by that.
Yes.
And that is why I remember when I grew up, when I was 12, 13, when I was a teen, the word Southern Cameroon was not the kind of word that you need a kind of extra courage. That's why when these people went to AAC, they said, we are Southern Cameroon. Because it took a certain amount of courage to say that.
To say the word
Southern Cameroon. Yes. Because of the historical baggage that comes with that.
Yes.
They did not want it. So, now me and you are talking about Ambazonia. Because the train of Southern Cameroon, we've rode that train, we're going on and forward.
Yes.
So symbolisms, we have to be able to recognize it's a very potent element of the fight, despite not being the clash of swords and the explosions of guns.
So, which are some of the symbols in southern Cameroon's Ambazonia that you think?
The first one is the Ambazonian flag, right?
Yes.
I know.
I think that one has its place now established.
Yes. The problem is that we still have some brothers that try to explain the two. They still try to ride the two horses. They still have, you go to the house, they have the Southern Cameroon flag, and then the Cameroon flag is hard to let go. That stage. That part of it, they're
transitioning. I think.
Thank you.
I think they've admitted one in them. They cannot be two flags.
No, that's
so they've admitted one in. Yes, it's just to throw the other one out.
Over time. So there's the flag. There's the name, which the movement has described, and it's also become pretty congealed.
I think our people have already thrown the national anthem of La Republic out.
Thank you. And then there's another thing that I heard a couple of days ago about the fact that the ghost town has been shifted to a Monday operation.
Yes.
And that people call it
Country Sunday.
Country Sunday.
Yes.
That is so ingenious of the activists on the ground.
Yes.
So those are the kind of, like me and you were talking about Sunday itself, right?
Yes.
The Sunday today that we have integrated. It was a pagan worship.
Yes, to worship the sun god.
The sun god. And the Christians, in the awareness of the importance of symbolism, decided to change it and say, okay, it's the same thing with Christmas.
Even Christmas Day, I was going to say Christmas Day, so it was a pagan holiday.
Yes.
With that, they took the birth of Christ and put it there.
And put it on top. So that illustrates the importance of symbolism. And this part of that conversation is those of us back at home and abroad, those of us who are involved in this struggle, to be aware, symbol aware,
Yes.
To be able to, like, when you look at it, it's like, what does this remind me?
Yes.
That aspect of it. So symbolism is pretty central in our way of thinking of all oppressed people.
Right. So our people now should start listening to the John Minans. I don't believe he still lives.
I still listen to his music.
I have all his music.
Yes.
So they should start listening. They should start coming back and supporting our own artists.
That is correct.
Because when you support them, very soon they'll have the money to produce just as big as any other artist in the world.
That is correct.
I love what some of the young artists are doing. Magasco. Yes. There's one of my countrymen best by name, Ambe. Yes. I've seen his videos. They're incredible.
Yep.
And they sing beautiful music. And that music, it has its own uniqueness in our territory.
Yes. And sometimes some of us, like, I listen to some people talk about, I went to a friend's place and he was showing me his music studio in the ground and his Makossa collection from the 60s, the 50s. Now, what he doesn't seem to realize is that the taste that he developed from Makossa was implanted into him from hearing nothing but that for so many years.
Yes, it was planted.
We have to deconstruct that.
Yeah.
We have to consciously deconstruct that. We have to consciously. In the beginning, it's going to be a little bit awkward. Like, I've listened to Makossa all my life. Well,
yes.
it's time for Makossa to go because Makossa has become a problem.
Yes.
Another thing is the issue of soccer. Like people are like, it's hard, Cameroon.
No, look, soccer was not invented by La République.
Thank you.
It's a war game.
Yep.
We just need to bring it home.
Yes.
And we don't need to
support
think that when La République is playing, then somehow we are forced to watch it or support it. Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Absolutely not. You're supporting the colonizer.
Thank you.
Let me take another word out. You see this thing where they say our brothers? That needs to be cut off very, very cleanly so that we stop doing that, because brothers don't do what you and I have been describing.
Thank you.
These are barbarians that are out to eliminate us in our land.
That's correct.
Because I think they've tried to assimilate us, they've tried to miseducate us, and somehow we remain resilient, educated, smart people, and they decided that the only way we are going to get rid of these people, or we are going to exploit the land freely, is to get rid of these people. And you know why? It is because the human being is the only creative element in the environment. That's
correct. So
we Ambazonians are the only resource in that territory that is intelligent. We can stop them. We can debate with them, and we can get them out.
That's correct. And when you hear the word, like you were saying about brother, it tends to be weird that the only time or the only kind of people who use that is the same people who go on TV and say, what rights are you talking about, and all the nonsense, the Chiromas. They are the same people who would call us Francophone brothers. At the same time, when the camera is off, we're Anglophiles.
We're Anglophiles. We're
Bamenda. Yeah. Apparently, the Bamenda has become an adjective, a negative adjective. I grew up, spent a lot of time up with my aunt in Tip Top Savannah. Bamenda is one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Nicely baked earth.
Yes.
Red, nicely sun-baked, and you don't see that kind of sun-baked earth.
Yes. It's been deprived of everything, but it remains a resilient town with resilient people that have changed a colonial empire. I tell you, when the French are trying to eliminate us, is because they think that if we continue to exist, they will lose their French empire in Africa.
And they will. They will. I can tell you that they will, because I think as far as our struggle is concerned, the bus has left the station. There's no way for them to put us back into that point. The thing that is left is now for us, like a people, to manage the rest of the pieces to arrive where we need to get to.
Yes, and I'm going to bring another thing that we need to change. Victoria needs to be called Victoria.
It is Victoria.
Yes.
Anybody who grew up
Limbe is the name of a German Limburg.
If they were going to call it Limburg, maybe we would think about that. But
but they make it Limbe, which is really a corruption of the word Limburg. And they don't want to remind us that we actually were a British colony from.
Victorians don't take that line down. You're gonna hardly see a Victorian calling it Limbe. You're just not gonna see it.
Well, some call it for the convenience of it, Well, it's because take for example, sometimes you go around and people ask you, where are you from? If you really want to say where you're from, you won't say Cameroon.
Of course.
But if it's a thing where you don't even care anything, you just say Cameroon and be gone. Otherwise, you say Ambazonia.
So that's the test. The test, like me, you were looking at it. The protest that happened in the 90s and all of that, people didn't come out and say Ambazonia. People said, even during the SDF time, people talked of independence side by side. But now, people are saying Ambazonia in the territory pretty comfortably.
Yes.
The way you would convince yourself, there's all this psych thing that you stand in front of the mirror and you introduce yourself.
Yes.
To the mirror when you have to go give a speech. the day when you are comfortable to look at yourself in the mirror and say, my name is XYZ, I come from Ambazonia, you've crossed a certain threshold.
Yes.
When I walk into a room, right, thanks in part to a lot of these great developments back at home, it's true, people don't know Ambazonia. How many people know Cameroon where they've heard the name? They don't even know where it is on the map either.
Well, they know it because some soccer
maybe.
Yes, yes.
But when I walk into a room,
yes,
and people ask me, I almost expect it. They're like, hi, where are you? I'm like, I'm from Ambazonia. They're like, Ambazon? What?
Yeah, where's that?
Where's that? And
Yes.
I'm like, oh, that's in Africa, because sometimes people hear Ambazonia, Amazonia?
Yes.
Like they think it's South America.
Yes.
I'm like, no, Ambazonia. They're like, where's that?
Yes.
And most of the time, it's my African American brother like, brother, where's that? I'm
Yes.
like, that's in West Africa.
Yes.
They're like, I've never heard about that.
Yes.
I'm like, well, it's that I can explain, right? I've put in their head, and most of them write it down, or they're like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
But now I've put in their head there's something called Ambazonia.
Yes.
Now I can explain the detail when they're like, well, I'm like, nah, it's now occupied by Cameroon, which is a French.
Yes.
The conversation is secondary. That part of the explanation is secondary, but the part of conveying that there's an entity called Ambazonia,
Yes.
that job has been done, and you cannot undo it from that person
Yes,
anymore.
no,
That memory
no,
has become part
no,
of
no.
the experience. Yes.
No, thanks to Gojidinka, who has spent a lot of effort making that clear.
Yes.
I want to thank you for I think, I keep saying that the people who manage our movement need to bring you on as a strategist, because you spend a lot of time, you use your technology knowledge and your vast read into other struggles and what lessons we can learn from these struggles. Anytime I talk to you, I learn a lot. So
thank you very much. And hey, I do need though to express my sincere honor to the people back at home who are standing up for all of us. The people that are able to wake up and stand out in these streets while the toting gun of a brute is pointed at them. It takes a certain thing. And
while you're addressing that, I want you to repeat the thing where you talk about stages in a struggle, so that because once that people understand what's going on, they're able to manage it better.
Yeah, I think
so. Explain the stages, and then explain in what stage we are right now.
Yes, so every struggle has essentially, theoretically, 3 stages. Take, for example, the American independence struggle. People are upset that they are being taxed while they don't have a say in how the taxes are being formed. There's the first stage, people get upset. And then, normally what people do is they try to move around. Imagine in a
How
room.
long does the upset stage last?
It depends on how, that's where leadership is an issue. It depends on how the leadership is able to calm down and say, okay, it's time to move on to the next step. And most of the time, they are not very tightly separated, but it's just one become more dominant.
Yes.
Right. So
no, the anger part is always there.
Always there.
Yeah,
exactly.
Especially when you go and scratch it,
exactly.
People. It's like we've been talking about what they're doing to us now, and the bodies that are being dumped, the cancer causing agents that are being spread in the one of the most beautiful coastlines in the whole
continent.
Yes. It's being polluted.
Yes, and that the ecosystem in that place, if you look at it, there's no real landmass that replicates that, right? Because you look at where Kilimanjaro is, with the water, Lake Victoria, we have Fako Mountain and right to the Atlantic.
Yes.
That ecosystem is unique.
Yes.
But in the context of colonial, it's being destroyed.
Yes.
So people go to the first stage, which is a typical stage, which is natural, but because your enemy doesn't walk through the door with, I'm going to get you, right? For us, they say, oh, we were just brothers, we're just coming back, we're just brothers. And they didn't mean any of that for 1 second.
Nope.
And so there's the first stage where it's a stage of anger. Like a kid, me and you, at least for me, I grew up. You step your foot out the door, at home, everybody's talking, you step your foot out the door, every symbol of authority is popping French back at you. The gendarme, who you knew could do anything they want with you without consequences.
Yes.
The police, the army, and the more they were powerful, the more francophonized they were.
Yes.
So the gendarme was more francophonized than the police.
Yes.
But the police was also francophonized.
Yes.
Then the deal.
Yes.
And so that whole anger stage, the frustration of what's this thing about? That whole anger stage.
Let me ask you this, and I think talking about anger stage.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine? It's really stupidity. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that in the 21st century,
Yes.
these people come to colonize an educated population because they were less educated, not only politically but in every other way than we were.
That's correct.
And they come and they're trying to treat us as though we are some rustic society with 12 miles tribal languages that still need some umbrella language, and they were going to come and introduce that language.
That is
because French is an inferior language, and you want to come and take that inferior language and replace it and replace a superior language with that inferior language. It just will not work.
That is why when you look at we look at Mitterrand saying, France cannot survive without its domination of Africa. It's true. Like we're talking about, Thomas Sankara literally was overthrown basically almost a week after he voted for the rights of New Caledonia. The question is, what is the thing about New Caledonia? Is that it's another French colony in the Pacific that the French always felt that they have a right to dominate, and after their own struggle for years, the New Caledonia issue ended up in the UN. So the first stage has been shifted. People have mobilized international solidarity, and the world is like, come on, you can't be doing this.
Yeah.
But you need to mobilize people, right?
Yeah.
Which me and you need to do for our own people.
Yes.
Because I don't think the overall humanity, the 5 billion people on earth, think that is normal for people's corpses to be floating in water for asking for basic rights.
No.
And he voted for that, and the French were like, this is a wrong example, he must go, right? And they ended up overthrowing Sankara, which is still in New York today. The case is still going on after the activists in Burkina Faso rose up and kicked out their dictator, their Blaise Compaoré. So there's the first stage, the anger stage, which is natural. People are angry, people lash out, right? Mm-hmm. You're angry. So most of that anger stage is after trying to understand. Our people try to understand, right? Mm-hmm. You have people like Fallon. They just try to understand. He sat there, translated everything to both languages, and he thought we could produce this new republic where people spoke both languages. He hoped. The more he understood, the more he spent time, the more they were like, oh, we got a tool here we can use. And so after a certain point, that's why you look at all the older generation, right?
Mm-hmm. let me just I see the things that I say that I would like to repeat.
Sure, of course.
I used to say that the reason why it took us 56 years before this revolution came is because we took like 10 or 15 years trying to do what Fallon did.
Yes.
Thinking that, okay, we can create this Ethiopia where, we have our two
former colonial
two brothers. Let's use the word because we use it in a sincere way.
Yes,
we'll use our two brothers. We can make these two brothers become one and a great people
and a new thing.
And then we expand our markets. We expand our everything.
Yes. So we went through that.
So it took like, and then it took maybe another 15 years to realize that
there's poisoning going on.
It's not even that they are different.
Yes.
Then we say, they are different. Let's understand the difference and see how we work them out. Mm-hmm. And that's why we went from our federation to unity state to going back to being La Republic to we try SDF. Okay, let's democratize. If we democratize, we'll be good. When was SDF created? 1992.
Yes.
Where are we? 2017.
Yes.
How many years is that?
That's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time.
The math failed me on that.
Yes. No, it's 92 to 2002.
10.
It's 10. 2002 to 2012. 20
to 22.
22
would be 30. You remove just.
So my brother.
5, yeah.
So it's been SDF has existed for over 25 years.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
SDF is not even part of our
conversation.
No, SDF is not part of our reaction to La Republic.
Yep.
Maybe because they still believe that there's something they can do. SDF, wake up. That's all I'm going to say.
That is true, and I think that's the beauty of what our people have done. That leadership, our people have illustrated that leadership is not a thing of individuals, it's a thing of communities.
Yes.
Politicians and activists are trying to catch up.
Yes.
Leaders are trying to catch up now.
Yes.
So
let's move to stage 2, Pa.
Stage 2 is when people get Machiavellian.
Yes.
Because suddenly you realize your enemy is Machiavellian.
Yes.
You realize your enemy is not a moral, the discussion is not a moral argument.
Yes.
Because every time you put moral, you're like, listen, we are Africans. You can't be doing this to another African. They're like, yeah, that's true, that's true. And you're like, oh,
yes.
all right. So
yes.
once you realize that your enemy is Machiavellian, then you become strategic,
yes.
tactical. You start understanding them.
And so we have been strategic in
delegitimizing them as a regime.
We've delegitimized them.
That is very strategic.
We've told our people not to obey them.
People have communicated to every diplomatic presence in the territory that
I can tell you one of the biggest shifts is the mental shift. We're talking about symbolism.
Yep.
I think for our people to have tuned these people out.
Yes.
It's a very solid foundation.
Yes.
From that solid foundation, we've had the Southern Cameroon Broadcasting Corporation.
That's another huge deal. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Whoever made this happen, thank you.
So that's the strategy that's beginning to kick in now.
Yes, we've gotten strategic. We're not thinking about, we've like the Chinese would say, the 1,000 cuts that kill a giant. You bleed a giant to death. You don't try to cut their head, in a big, wonderful day when you chop the head of a giant.
No, it doesn't happen.
The Chinese say you just bleed the giant to death with the 1,000 more.
There was a thing you said about using the big sword.
Because if you carry a big sword to go cut the head of a giant, the sword might fall on you and kill you. But if everybody, you give him many chooks in his body, let me use the word chooks, he's going to bleed to death, always thinking that he's still tough to stand you.
Yes.
Because he's never going to feel what's happening. Now we're opening multiple fronts.
Yes.
We are beating them right now on the media front.
Yes.
Of all the arguments that are going on CRTV and all the CTV and all those arguments are totally fluid for everybody who has any interest in the story.
Yes.
You listen to them and you're like, you didn't convince me, try a little bit, please, harder.
Yes.
And now
they tell blatant lies.
Thank you. And
for example, they will take, in the days when we're boycotting February 11, and they go and bring pictures from some other town and they're showing us.
Yes.
And now people just look at it and like, no, that's not boy.
And now they're threatening chiefs. If you don't bring 11 chiefs to march with you,
we'll replace you.
We'll replace you.
You see, so how do you replace a chief?
Thank you. Now, what does that say? What does that say?
That they're running out of options.
That is exactly correct. Now we have started becoming strategic. It takes a certain amount of strategy for your own chief to be in a posture where they are suspecting your chief will not go out to march.
Yes.
That means your chief understands that his people are not about to go march there, and I'm not about to disgrace myself. And I'm being a confrontation. It takes that posture and that next step, right?
Yes.
That everything is called head, I win, tail, you lose.
Yes.
Because everything that the colonizer does in that strategic phase, they are losing.
Yes.
As long as you hold your ground and you don't get caught up trying to play their game.
So the idea of discussing this stage 2 is to let our people know that we're not out there marching anymore, pumping our fists, and there are no guns shooting. But there's a lot of strategy going on our side, and the enemy is doing the same thing.
Yes.
That's why they're coming after the chiefs, trying everything to sabotage, come with false stories, try to bring us fake federalism, even though we have practiced federalism
all these years. Attack activists like the brother in Belgium, Magbara.
Yes.
Try to attack. When did Cameroon care about blocks in? Bloggers.
I mean, these people have machine guns. The thing can come down on you like a storm. Now they're worried about ideas.
About the bloggers. That's the point.
It's about ideas.
Thank you. And so that's the thing. Now we've gotten
ideas and the news.
There we are.
Yes.
We are now. It's no more.
We are the same playing level.
We are the same playing level.
And they're losing, and that's why they're using threat.
Yes.
Go and convince our chief to bring their people to march. Don't say you must bring them, otherwise we'll depose you.
But that's the point. The point is, and that's why I was saying, in this next phase, this second phase, which is strategy and they've been Machiavellian or you're being too smart for them, this is the stage where if they suddenly appoint you, oh, now you're governor, you just need to put your own increment on your phone. Like, okay, all right, you crazy. You want my people to kill me? No problem. I'm going to prove to my people that I'm on their side. You grab your own documents and you send them out as much as you can. The same things like today we have Jews that are abandoning, they're coming here and giving testimony of their experiences being Jews. So now, like Mao Zedong would say, suddenly it is no more about, oh, we have a few Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians that we can manage and we can put them up in front of TV and they talk on behalf of Southern Cameroon. Suddenly, everybody is suspect.
Yes, it's all Ambazonians.
That's the every Ambazonian
that is
beautiful.
That is it almost like we're saying that the humans in the territory are the only creative elements. They're the only elements that can save themselves and save our country.
That's correct.
Each of them has become a leader.
Yes.
So you want to buy, you have to buy all of us.
That is correct.
And nobody has money to buy all of us.
Thank you. And everybody suddenly, every place where you are, you become a source of information. Because the second phase of the battle is information battle.
Yes.
You become a source of information, a source of exposure.
And a source of a strategy implementation tool.
Yes. So if you are one of those administrators who have been stuck in Yaoundé for all the last 40 years, and you are like, if I retire now, what happens? No. Before you leave, you just need to grab all the documents. You don't need to worry about the idea. I don't know, this is maybe not important. No. Every document that comes through your face, send our own copy on the internet, because all those documents, sometimes you might not know, they have strategic information inside about things that makes it possible for us to expose to resources and organizations around the world, because there are a lot of organizations that would like to support our struggle, but they just don't have a way to stand.
Yes. And they don't have a way to understand. Let me say this. One of the reasons why our struggle has really been understood by the world and has been very devastating to the colonizer is that the lawyers were able to come and be very, very detailed about why they are protesting. And everybody around the world understood it, and it was an abomination.
Yes.
So when we used to go around before and say we've been marginalized, nobody quite understood it.
Marginalization is out the window. We've been exterminated. The lawyers have proved it in the most vivid way.
The same thing with the teachers. The teachers showed exactly what they're doing to us. And if you put all these things together, I think the UN classifies them as genocide.
Yes. And that is why in the world me and you live in, the Armenian genocide, when it happened, nobody recognized it like a genocide. It took time for the people, the leaders, the Armenian public in the world to put together that information through the pipeline of officialdom.
Yes.
But that did not mean that the crime had not been committed against them. The fact that for all those years people did not recognize that there was an Armenian genocide did not disqualify that the genocide happened.
Yes.
And so all what is happening to us, we need to be able to put all that information together and put it through the pipeline in the further process of delegitimizing this regime.
If you come to a place, you're trying to eliminate the language. You're trying to eliminate, in fact, the people, because when you start bringing your judges from La Republica and planting, you are replacing us with your people. You are replacing us with your people in our land. You're replacing our culture with yours in our land. And all of that, and then they're actually eliminating by some of the HIV, the cancer thing, and impoverishment. Those
particular two cases, there's a tight legal precedence for those things to be prosecuted in international courts, in the European Court and in other places. Now, what we need to do is just to gather the documents together, just like I was saying, whatever administrative position someone is still holding in Yaoundé and he's part of our territory, and finally everybody's excited that this day has happened. The humiliation that they have to go through every day, me and you cannot even imagine, right? Walking in Yaoundé, people call you names and you have to suddenly learn French quickly so you can pretend that you're a francophone too, you're not an Anglophone too,
we're gonna discuss something really quick. And I may just say this, I don't know if you have any input to it.
Sure, go ahead.
And it's this thing where when you were talking about Yaoundé going there to learn language, I was thinking how when you get employed, you first of all work for 6 months, no pay. And then you go to Yaoundé to go and follow up your pay. You're expected to bribe before people even do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's one. The other is that, and somebody was telling me this because it happened to their family. Government comes and rents your property. They don't pay you for a long time. And then if you follow up, they give you fiscal stamps. They don't pay you with money. They give you fiscal stamps. And then you have to take these fiscal stamps and then go to the bank. No, go to the treasury to have them buy them back. They will say no. And then sometimes somebody can come and say, okay, so you have fiscal stamps for 10 million francs. I'll give you 5 million and take them. When I listen to them, I'm like, are you serious? So you buy your property or you build your house, government comes and takes it. They're really playing God, but they're really playing Satan in our land.
That is correct. And
they're playing Satan in our land. And that is wrong.
Yes. What regime does that? What government? I like to use the word regime in describing that. What normal government does that?
Yes.
What's the purpose of a government if that's what it's supposed to be doing to people? Who needs a government if that's what's supposed to be doing to people?
Yeah, no, we don't need these people. They just need to disappear.
They need to get going. They need to get going, and our people have kind of kicked that train on the rails. And those of us who are out of the country, we need to put our hands on the back of that train and keep, No,
we have a role to play, and it's a very powerful role.
Yes.
In the sense that we need to organize ourselves properly.
Yes.
We need to set structures where we all can communicate and where we all can respond very fast to issues on the ground.
Yes.
Move us to stage 3. I didn't quite get stage 3.
So stage 3 is the stage when so you have the stage 3 is the stage when your enemy has literally, in the context of power games, have lost. You have control of the space, but now you don't have the accolades of world diplomacy. You don't have embassies. You don't have a seat in the UN. That's stage 3. And that's the stage where your enemy now is just using the old boys club to keep you out, right? In stage 3, most of the time people just wait them out. You just wait your enemy out. Your enemy has lost, basically. Think about...
it seems to me that you're talking a case where there was not a physical fighting war. Because in a physical fighting war, it reaches a point where the negotiations and then the international process moves faster. It seems to me, and you can correct me, it seems to me that in the way we are going, in a non-violent way, obviously it's going to drag much longer because there's not that big sword you were talking about.
Yes, but so think about it, like take the case of Chiapas, for example. You're right that they were not an international personality, but right now they control their education, they control their water, they control all the mining companies that are mining in their country. Take Somaliland, right? They sign contracts. If you're going to be a company to do business in Somaliland, you have to sign contract with them. There's no, a Somalia government. There is a Somalia government, but that Somalia government has totally nothing to do in terms of determining what's happening in Somaliland. The fact that they don't have an embassy in various countries, they don't have, the accolades, right, does not change that. And that stage 3 is a stage where you now are focusing on avoiding your enemy stabbing you back, because your enemy is not gone. After you defeat them, they don't just be like, oh, okay, thank you, good luck, and bye-bye, I'm sorry for all the years. Now, that stage 3 is the stage where you're trying to nail your enemy down. You start pursuing them in foreign courts to pay for the money that they exploited for the time they exploited. Because if you don't do, they will pursue you too. They will be like, oh, we invested here, now let's try to... You are like, no. How much did you put and how much did you take? Let's make the calculation. That stage 3, that's the time when you start, pushing stuff.
But look, every time you're naming these examples, I'm thinking, in those examples, there's no big-time colonizer who has all kinds of immunities around the world and does things with impunity.
Yes, but so think Zimbabwe, for example. Not Zimbabwe and Mugabe, during the time when they were fighting for their independence, right? Stage 3 was a time when it was clear to everybody that it's game over. And now the British were trying to say, okay,
that's when they brought Lancaster House and all
thank
that.
you. They're like, okay, you just need to sign that, in our case, you just need to sign that, everybody who worked in the army is automatically immunized from prosecution, for example, stuff like that. And you're like, no, they're going to go through a cut, or stuff like that, where they try, because the reason why they're covering that is because they don't want other people observing from different, they call it the domino theory, right? So stage 3 is you're trying to undercut the concept of the domino theory. Their worry is that if you just walk away free, all the other countries where they are oppressing, they too want to walk away free. So they're trying to make it costly for you. And that's stage 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do a dance with them, right? Like in
they did that in South Africa.
They did that. They did that. So, for example, in stage 3 in South Africa, de Klerk realized, oh, damn, we're in stage 3.
Yeah.
They quickly signed, okay, no problem. We're going to move Mandela from prison. We're going to keep him over here. That stage, you have to be very alert.
Yes,
and
we want you to sign that you're not going to go around prosecuting all these people who participate in the apartheid system.
Yes, or for example, they'll be like, okay, Sonara is already here. We're going to pay you the real price for oil. But we just need now to stick on to Sonara. Right? It's Sonara, let's negotiate the price of Sonara. It's true that before we used to mine, but let's negotiate the price because it's our company, the kind of stuff. Like the Iranians say, get the fuck out of here, right? And people were like, oh, the British were like, oh, they seized our oil. And Kennedy was, excuse me, you have some oil in Iran? Seriously? You have the balls to say Iran seized your oil in Iran? You know, so that stage 3 is the stage when you're trying to block all the new ways your enemy is trying to take to undermine your process, right? And that can be very, very, very deadly and tiring.
So you need to have some good experts and
you need to think very broadly. See, Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't manage the 3 well,
and
suddenly Sudanese are fighting the other Sudanese. Suddenly,
yes, and that's a disaster.
And so what you have is that your public starts saying, "What's the difference?" Right?
No, there's always a difference. I think when the public says that, you just need to clean house.
Exactly.
You just need to come home and
define
and define who you are as a people and sit down.
Clarity and rules and what is that?
Yes.
You don't leave a big gulp hole where stage 3 is mostly. We talked about the left behind.
It's mostly
to create structures to avoid you being paralyzed, because the people who lost that power, they have different interests that are beyond you.
Yes. They're still trying to see what else they can hold on to.
Exactly. And if you succeed, right? If you do succeed to kick them out with a clean slate, and then suddenly your economy jumps and your economy is, then that would just be the signal to everybody else that it's time to kick these people out no matter the cost. And they don't want that. They want it to be like, okay, like De Gaulle used to say, vous voulez l'indépendance, vous allez l'avoir avec les conséquences. That's what De Gaulle said to Sékou Touré. You want independence? You're going to get independence with all the consequences, right?
No, he was a thief.
There you go. So they peel quota off the road.
Yes.
They unwire the whole country.
Yes.
That is the kind
those are barbarians. Those are barbarians, and they're people who when things look, if the French had managed their decolonization well, they would still maintain good relationships with these countries and continue to do good business. I think the first really only francophone country that has, outside of Algeria, was Rwanda, and when Rwanda had an opportunity, they went English.
I like the word you said, outside of Rwanda, out of Algeria, because Algeria is still struggling because stage 3 was usurped by the French, right? The French still used this third stage where it was clear the French were going to leave now. But before they left, they sabotaged the independence of Algeria. They sponsored the Islamists in Algeria were sponsored by the French. And so they sabotaged the independence of this country from blossoming. And so they can always say, you see, those people, when we were in charge, it was better than now. That stage, you need to prepare for it.
Let me say this. Your life can never be better being managed by somebody else.
Thank you.
Your life can never be better being managed by somebody else. Yes. And so those who are clinging under clinging to La République to come around and think, oh, if I go, I'll lose my income. You can never be a full human being being controlled by another, especially as a colonial subject. It's not even a colonial subject. It's a subject of colonial subjects.
That's correct. And so Rwanda was a complete different case. Rwanda is this case where the French, the third stage was managed really great. Like everything was blocked. I mean, But there were also other things at play. For example, because the Clinton administration had blown the deal, they did not stand up to their own values, in part because the French lied to them, bold-faced lie, and said, oh, no, we are managing it, don't worry, it is this, that. As soon as, after Clinton was out of power, it became clear to him that he's just been duped by the French, and he was really pissed that he, for all his great economic progress that he brought to the United States economically, that the opening of the world economically, that the stain of the Rwandan genocide has been stuck with him, he decided, okay, we're going to help the Rwandans rebuild their country. And he put his foot down. The French tried everything to overthrow Kagame. I mean, Kagame is not a saint, right? I'm not some advocate for Kagame here.
I am an advocate of Kagame. I am an advocate of Kagame because
he's not Kagame, a saint, but I'm saying
nobody's a saint.
He built his country,
yes,
and the French were determined to sabotage that effort.
Yes.
The French did everything to sabotage. They even tried to rally the Green parties in Europe, right? Who supposedly are progressive people, started supporting this lady who was going back there and trying to bring back the thesis of, tribal Hutu Tutsi thesis. Even this lawyer who was here in Minnesota went down there. I blew the cap off him when he came back and said, he said, I went there, my freedom of speech. If you bring genocidal thesis in Rwanda, you're going to go to prison. Because if you talk the same way about the Jews in Germany, you go to prison. If you talk the same way about the Jews in Israel, you go to prison. Those are democracies. They understand that speech can be a problem if the speech is criminal speech. And he tried to play the game of, just uncivilized African trying to break my right to speech. And people are like, listen, we have the same laws in Europe, and even in Israel, you have the same laws, Yes. That you cannot sanitize genocide. Yes. In Germany, if you try to sanitize genocide, rejectionist. If you do that in Germany, you go to jail too. So it's the same thing about the French, right? Trying to. So yeah.
Let me bring you back to one. Let me ask you this: what's the role of leadership? And give it really quick, please. Mm-hmm. What's the role of leadership in each of the stages?
So in the initial stage in the first stage where you've been harassed, you haven't developed your own leadership. If you had your own leadership, you'll not be easily colonized, right? Because your leadership will rally on you.
Even if there was a leadership, like in our case, they smashed it out.
They smashed it out. So your leadership is not a match for the opponent. Mm-hmm. So there's that first stage.
Yes.
The second stage, in essence, what the second stage is the building of new leadership.
Okay.
And that's why you people start figuring out, okay,
who is who? What do they stand for?
Yeah, exactly.
What are their abilities?
Yeah.
What are their skills?
And like in the case of Ireland, the Irish Republican Army, and the Sinn Féin, and the case of the Irish struggle, Northern Ireland struggle, the leadership became so sophisticated that the real IRA and the IRA they look like they were fighting one another, because there were one group that said it is independence or nothing. And there's another group that said, we're going to go to independence. They were like, no, they could talk to multiple audiences at the same time. And they were able to come here to the United States, mobilize the Irish community in the United States to support their struggle.
Okay.
To a point where suddenly the British were helpless.
So stage 2 is
leadership.
Looking for your leadership. And I'm sure that by the time you go to stage 3, would it be crystallized at that point?
By stage 2, your leadership would have been crystallized. Now is you need to take your game to a new level.
Okay.
The way to fight sabotage, because that is where most of the sabotage, they will try to do it with people who have acquired leadership credentials in your formal community.
Okay.
Right. That's what they would try in your second stage.
Right.
Because those are people that are legitimate.
Right.
But if as a movement you've had these conversations before,
yes.
You've had this conversation as a movement, that they're going to try to use some people in this movement to try to sabotage it. When they try to use you, then it's very transparent then.
Yes.
Because you've had the conversation
yes.
as a movement. That's why
yes.
it's very...
So at that point, part of the strategy is to educate your whole population.
Yes.
So that they know... So they can also have independent judgment of what's going on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that all the multiple layers of the game is apparent to your public. Right? So that when somebody comes and says, well, these French people, is true, we've beaten them, they have accepted, they have gone out, now it's time to do business, they want to pay the same price like everybody else, let's just do business. And your people say no. No.
See, that is just another way of entry again.
Exactly. That's what they did that's how the Islamists in they use them in Algeria, and they say, oh, these other people, they are not God fearing. We are all God fearing people. We are Catholics, Republic, France, and the same. Think about Sudan, right? Let's not waste too much time in that. Let's talk about our own struggle. I was just about to talk about how the French banks were at the UN criticizing China and saying, "Oh, China is the country that is making the Sudanese government to be so bold because China is doing business in Sudan." That there's an embargo.
Financed by
and
French
apparently, when the Obama administration started investigating which were the countries that were violating the UN embargo, it turned out that the French banks were the major violators, and that the Chinese companies were just small players in the big game played by the French bank. And they slammed the French bank with this huge fine.
Right. So in stage 3, we need to watch out who our leaders are, what they're doing, and what our oppressors are doing.
Yes,
making sure we plug other doors for them.
Exactly.
In fact,
because stage 2, you've broken the back of your oppressor.
Yes.
Stage 3, you want to keep your leaders in check.
Yes.
How you do that is by educating your public.
Yes.
Now your public is massively educated politically enough to be able to see the game that the leaders are playing. And they're able to say, okay.
And be able to challenge them also if they're not doing it properly.
Exactly. And that's why when one leader suddenly, starts saying, at this point now we also want our own independence because, it is the people I'm from Mafe, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are Bayan people. Historically, we were the people who ran all this area. And you look at him.
Yeah, that's a saboteur.
And you're wondering.
The colonial language.
Exactly. And you're wondering, what is your game?
Yeah.
And your public is able to see transparently through that. And Bayan people are also able to see. So in that stage, because you're breaking the back of your...
Bayan people were able to see that when the enemy came, they treated all of us the same.
Exactly.
And we're going to free ourselves by being together.
Exactly.
Because together we're stronger to stay. But I really want to thank you for coming again and for continuing to impact this struggle. And I know that as it continues to go, we'll be pulling from other skills. And I know you're sitting on this show. It's always there.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, I can only say thank you, everybody at home, for standing up for all of us.
Thank you.
You've made all of us so proud.
It's very, very proud.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks again.